Ugh. Getting chills just staring down at me like that. We have not one, but two Monday night football games for you. Yeah, all right, Kirk. I get it. Like, I don't know what it is. He's just staring over me. All right, I feel much better now. Not one, but two same game parlays for you here as well. All right. So we appreciate you as always being a part of the Odd Shopper community, the ever growing, fastest growing sports betting community here on YouTube. So hit the thumbs up button, please, because you know that does us a lot. Also, we want you subscribed here. We want you part of that community, right? It's all business when we get to the Vikings and Eagles game, but we've got the Titans and Bills game to look at first. I'll tell you all about how you can turn $10 into $200 free at BetMGM. So trust me, we have a bunch here for you tonight, including, of course, not one, but two same. We're not going to supersize by any means. Here he is again. Kind of looks like Lindquist, doesn't he? Just a little bit, right? I mean, who are you going to put your money on, this guy or this guy? That's all I'm saying. We'll get to that game in a second, but I mean, are you going to go this, like, look at this, that guy or that guy? Come on. All right, let's head over to BetMGM and start with the Titans and Bills. And then we'll move into a three-leg same-game parlay for the Vikings-Eagles. But a lot of this, if not all of this, and we'll go to the build section here, is how you see this football game. Do you see the Titans covering that 9.5, 10? Do you see the Titans pulling out an upset? Or do you see Buffalo winning handedly? Covering anything 9.5, 10 or greater is winning handedly, is not sweating against the Titans. So I like the Titans to cover. I'm not picking them to win outright, but I think we can start here with them to cover. Look, they're still trying to find some pieces in the pass game, clearly. And a healthy, upright Ryan Tannehill is always going to be the goal here, by all means. But I like the Titans to keep this close, under 10 points, by all means. And also, we know that they have means of controlling the clock and controlling at least time of possession with a guy like Derrick Henry, who also has the big play capability. So you're not burning clock into the ground, just handing it on over to Derrick Henry. I also think that the Bills, as much as they can throw the football and as well as they can throw the football, this is also going to be keeping the ball away from Derrick Henry. Look, that total at 47.5 is low, I think, for both of these two teams who, with the questions we have defensively for the Tennessee Titans, as well as the ability for both teams, Josh, and look, just look at the two big main playmakers on the ground. We're going to get to some player props here in a second to add to this, but you look at the total at 47.5, and I was a little surprised. I thought this would be closer to 49.5, but the reason why we go over, not just the offenses that can move the football, and I think Buffalo, is definitely a team that people will point to more clearly, no argument here, than Tennessee in this situation. But we go back to the big play capability of Derrick Henry, and then look on the other side, Josh Allen as well. You've got two guys in this game in the league who are right there at the top of being able to turn a rush play, a running play, into 80 yards and a score, into 65 yards and a score, into 33 yards and a score, what have you. But these guys, the big play capability is definitely what I want to target. So if we start to look at an anytime touchdown play here, you're going to get odds, Derrick Henry, Josh Allen. I like Singletary involved in this. We're going to stay away from Knox. We've been burned too many times here. But I also want to target somebody like Josh Allen if we're really going over here, right? So I think, again, this is a case where you're going to go over. The clock's going to move a little bit with the ball on the ground, but not in the typical sense of, oh, it's just going to be burned out. You're going to get some big plays here. So I can go over 280 for Josh Allen. And then that leaves an anytime TD. And again, the easy ones, the ones that aren't going to do anything, we're at plus 525. Just look at what Derrick Henry does. It moves it to plus 700. That's not terrible. Okay? It's not terrible. It's probably not the best reflection of where the odds should shift. That gets us to plus 1,200. I don't mind that at all. And then I'm going to play Singletary here at plus 1,100. Wait, I feel like I have an equal share of Josh Allen getting an anytime TD versus Devin Singletary. So let's do this and play Josh Allen at plus 1,200. So we've added that to the slip here. Okay, so that's the one game parlay that we've added for the first game. Titans plus 9.5, over 47.5. Josh Allen, 280 plus passing yards in a game that should go over that number with points involved, probably playing from either a neutral or behind position if the Titans are covering this and Josh Allen does score anytime. Is look, when the Bills need plays, when the Bills need to get something going here, it's going to be Josh Allen with the football in his hands. All right, so there we have it. That's the first.
Fuck it, I'll live in Hawaii.
You'd be fine with the 10 a.m. starts in California or on the West Coast?
Yeah, college football would be 9 a.m. too. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So I never liked it, but now that I have a kid, it gives me as many early games as possible. That's the thing.
The only thing that would be weird if you lived on the West Coast is, I don't know if you've ever done this, gone out to, you probably not now that you have a kid, but go out to the bar, you come home, college football's been on all day, you turn on your TV and Hawaii's still playing. It's like 2 a.m. Does that ever happen to you? So they've got like a 1 a.m. Eastern time kick.
Yeah, for sure. And usually after, a night at the bar in Hawaii is still on, I'm probably live betting that game.
It's a great tradition.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yo, what is going on, everybody? We got an exciting one for you today. I'm Dave Loughran at Loughy_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D, bringing you a 2-game Monday night slate. No showdown talk today. We're going 2 games, not really your traditional doubleheader, not a 7 and a 10. We got like a 7 and an 8:30, but still 2 very good football games to break down right here on the Stokastic DFS channel. Hit that thumbs up. Show us some love around here if you haven't done so yet. Subscribe to the channel and hit that join down below. And we get those free super chats each month, the custom emojis, the sweet badges, and the other stuff we'll do for you along the way. But more than anything, I'm here with Matt Gajewski at Matt_Gajewski. It's a little bit unique today, man. No showdown, but Bills, Titans, Eagles, Vikings. We got some good games on tap tonight.
Oh, these games are awesome. And we can use some of the same strategies we apply to showdown to 2-game slates. It's a limited player pool, so we will have to consider some duplication aspects on the slate. But I'm just excited. We have 2 awesome games tonight. That Packers-Bears game, wasn't always the prettiest. How many pass attempts did Justin Fields finish with? I think he had 7 completions.
It was bad.
I mean, they actually had success on the ground against the Packers, which I did not see happening. But I mean, I think Justin Fields has 15 completions on the year. Part of that, the monsoon, but my goodness, this is a weird Bears offense.
It's so weird, man. And they abandoned that run early on as well, which is funny because the reason the Packers were crushing them early on was because of their run game. They were gutting them with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, just truly gutting them.
Yeah, it was great to see Aaron Jones bounce back. Dillon having some success too, but Aaron Jones, all the explosive plays we wanted. Big time. And I don't have the numbers on this yet. I'm sure like PFF will put them out this morning, but did you notice a lot of the 2 RB sets?
Yeah. Well, and LaFleur talked about doing that.
Yeah, it seemed like they did it a lot.
For sure. And last week, I know he talked about doing it, but didn't do it quite as much. But you kind of have to when Christian Watson, I tweeted that he's going to need a security detail after these first 2 weeks to protect him from Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if it was his fault on that sweep when he was crossing. And did you see that? The fumble? Yeah. Not great. And then last week dropped a surefire 75-yard touchdown. But I mean, not the sweep when he was in motion, but I think all in all, you're going to see Aaron Rodgers throw less too. He threw only 25 times last night and they routed them. Fields threw 11 times. He had 7 completions. Do you know how many combined yards Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet have on the season?
It's got to be under 100.
Take a guess.
56.
4. Not 54. 4.
That's
Mooney
unbelievable.
Mooney had 1 reception for 8 yards in week 1. He had 1 reception for -4 yards yesterday. And Cole Kmet is still without a reception on the year.
Yeah, it was great for my showdown lineups.
No question, man. Okay, so RS, and happy to have you guys with us, as always. This is going to be fun. RS says, please stop propping up these running quarterbacks. They're all trash, always have been. Look, it's not necessarily true. Josh Allen is a very mobile quarterback. He can also throw, though, and he's got a lot of weapons. He stunk as a passer basically through his first 2 seasons. Jalen Hurts is the only reason this Eagles team has won games in the past 2 years. And I'm not sure if you watched it yesterday, but Kyler Murray as a passer was not great. And RS, to some extent, I don't even disagree with you that we prop up their ability to run and overlook their inability to pass, which in certain situations definitely hurts them. Matt, I didn't see I was watching Red Zone because I wanted to catch every one of these games, but fortunately, I flipped over because it was the last game on in overtime. Kyler Murray he had a play that was 21 seconds long on that 2-point conversion attempt that they scored on. He did that twice in the game and is the only reason they came back to win, aside from Derek Carr or Hunter Renfrow fumbling twice.
Yeah, I think Kyler Murray definitely adds something to your offense that a lot of quarterbacks don't. To his point, I mean, I think there's some good and bad. Lamar was awesome yesterday. He had the rare double bonus on DraftKings, 100 yards rushing, 100 yards passing. You never see that. He's the engine of their offense, and I think he will be as long as he remains in Baltimore. This might be a slight at Trey Lance. I mean, Trey Lance now will have gone essentially 3 years without playing football. He was a very questionable prospect to begin with. It's a guy that had I believe it's under 500 pass attempts in his college career. He played at the run heaviest FCS school you could go to in North Dakota State. That team does not throw the ball at all. So, I mean, he already had concerns. Everyone liked him because of the running, not because of his passing. You have to differentiate between real life football and fantasy football here. We loved him and everybody loved him across the industry because he had Lamar Jackson level upside for fantasy. I don't think any of us were really arguing he was a difference maker in games.
For sure. And I'm not saying that I wasn't saying whoever Timeout Sports, I wasn't saying Kyler can't pass. I'm saying it's very easy for us to overlook other kind of inadequacies with these Russian quarterbacks when they have the mobility. But yeah, not great for Chicago. I'm not surprised by that game at all, though, to be honest with you. It could have been a lot worse if, there weren't a couple turnovers from that Packers offense, but they got the offensive line mostly healthy. They got Alan Lazard back, and I needed that, Matt. I needed the Packers to win that because I also had Browns -5.5 and onside, perfectly placed onside kick. Joe Flacco orchestrates a comeback victory in Cleveland. Are you kidding me?
That was awesome. I had no stake in the game, so I was just love the chaos. But I mean, as a Browns backer, can you talk about a worse bad beat than that? Plus, they had opportunities to get it. Yeah,
dude. They had. I thought it was sealed up. They were up by 2 scores with just a couple minutes left. You're like, okay, the Jets are going to drive down the field twice and score touchdowns on both. I don't think so. Well, I was wrong. So we did. They did, and we lost. Anyway, we got 2 games today, some good ones. So I'm very excited for it. We're going to go game by game. We usually go position by position, but that's for showdown slate. So we'll go game by game. You guys got any questions? We'll hit you. We'll hit some of them as well. And Matt, I say I put it in the run sheet on the side. I think we still build a lineup today as well.
Yeah, let's do it. Why not?
It's not particularly easy either. A lot of good players on this slate.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of some of these showdowns we've had recently, like the Thursday nights showdown, where you just have all of these expensive plays because they're so good, elite plays in the league. And then you're talking about Noah Gray at the Stoneman and Justin Watson. And that's a fun component of these too, because we'll have to consider some of those guys to get away from some duplication if you're playing large field tournaments.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Derrick Henry. You're going to have to make some sacrifices in this one for sure if you're looking to build some good lineups. But there's also some cheap options that we'll get into. I was looking over this last night and this morning. So let's dive into it. We got over 200 people watching already. So happy to have you guys with us. And don't forget, we're going to use all these tools as we always do. They're super valuable tools. Two things here. The Monday night football slate, because we don't have like a double header page for this, is on the early slate projections. So if you're looking for any of these, it can be found on the early slate projections. You also get, or like same with Showdown and everything as well. You also, if you want, 3 free days of Stokastic Plus Platinum NFL. Everything on the site for NFL is free. All of our Showdown stuff, all of our main slate, whatever it is, Express, slates, you name it, top stacks tool, top plays tool for Showdown, projections, ownership, all of our premium data that we have in there, all of our betting stuff entirely free. All you have to do is use the link in the description if you're watching after the fact, or if you're watching right now, Mike can throw that link into the chat. Check it out. No risk whatsoever. No price or strings attached whatsoever. And I've said a million times, you guys been burned probably in the past by other sites. You weren't happy with their tools or any of that. In this case, you don't have to worry about that. It's 3 days entirely free if you want to follow along and check all of this out. So also early slate is where we have it right now. Wouldn't be surprised if we just move it to the main slate at this point too. It would make sense. But anyway, let's dive into it. First up, you got the Bills and you got the Tennessee Titans. The Bills at home, Matt, laying 10 points at home. The main question I have for this game, because we know this is how the Tennessee Titans have come in and beat the Bills in consecutive seasons, is simply with their ground game. Is Derrick Henry and this offensive line, are they capable of doing what they've done on the ground against the Bills for the third straight year? My lean is no right now.
My lean is no as well. It's always possible, but this is a team that has lost pieces on the offensive line year over year. You look back at some of the prior performances Tennessee's had against Buffalo. There's not all the same group of players on that offensive line. Derrick Henry's another year older. He's coming off his first real season-ending injury. I know he had a little cameo appearance at the end of the season last year, but it was essentially a season ender. And it hasn't been great since he's come back. And we already know how he operates if this team gets down in games. How do they really come back? And I think that's going to be a struggle for them throughout the year. When you look at this week against Buffalo, we know Buffalo is going to score. They're going to score against the best opponents across the league. Tennessee with Derrick Henry, he's not really a pass catching back. They might be forced to use him in that capacity today. We'll talk about the injuries later. But now without A.J. Brown, you don't even have the elite receiving weapons to potentially put you back in games. They're using a nasty rotation at receiver. None of them are proven commodities. So if that happens, I think the run game is essentially erased. You need Tennessee to take the opening kickoff, score immediately for them to even play with that game script. It's also very hard for me to see.
It's real tough. This might honestly be one of those games where I pay attention to and try and find a good live bet, because I think, and you kind of just alluded to this, I think early on we might be able to see what direction this is headed, right? Because the addition of Von Miller for the Bills was massive in week one. Their run defense, which was a weak spot last year, really was shored up in week one. Of course, Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers aren't, Derrick Henry, but I don't know if Derrick Henry is the Derrick Henry of old. I really don't. So we can talk about it right now. He's not overpriced. I can say that much. That would be the one check in the positive box as far as he goes. He's $7,800 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's $8,800, which is odd because he's still $600 more than Dalvin Cook. How do you reconcile that, given Derrick Henry's price point today as 10-point dogs and a non-pass catching back?
Yeah, I think you kind of actually just laid it out fairly well. I don't understand the price. I would rather just play Dalvin Cook, assuming I can only play one. It's a 2-game slate, so I think there are ways to play them both. But all this to say, the way people play Derrick Henry just historically, he's generally a little more owned than a back I'm trying to get to with his profile. You just mentioned it. There's the receiving concerns. Now, no Dontrell Hilliard today. What is Tennessee going to do at the pass catching back. But ultimately, we've seen them pull guys off the street and play in pass catching roles year over year. Hilliard's one of the guys they've done that with. They've used Jeremy McNichols. We had the old Darrington Evans experiment for a few games here and there. Even when injuries have occurred, it's been very rare for Derrick Henry to get the pass game work. So I don't see why that would change today. And at his price point with a legitimate option right there, I think I'm just going to make the pivot in most of my lineups, assuming ownership stays where it is right now. And we actually have Derrick Henry is fairly owned today. So to me, I think that is the natural pivot.
Maybe, I mean, I think a lot of it too, right, is that they don't want to use him on passing downs if he's getting 30 carries a game.
And that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, because he's not the worst pass catching back, especially like you said, they bring guys off the couch. What do you think they will do in that respect today? Because if they fall behind, Tannehill's definitely going to have to throw. And one of the more interesting things that I noticed, and I'm sure you noticed this as well, when you're looking at pass play percentage in week 1, this was a team that you'd say, okay, they lost. Yeah, but they were ahead most of the game. And usually they're one of the highest, the highest run percentage teams in the league. They only ran 43% of the time, despite like either a neutral or favorable game script throughout that entire contest.
Yeah, which is really interesting to see. As far as like Derrick Henry goes this week, I don't even know if he's on pass downs, but who would they use instead of him?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I thought you might have a better answer than myself.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about their roster. I'm sure you know this too, just from, these guys for sure from the preseason. I know we talked about them.
Yeah, we did.
But they drafted Hassan Haskins. He's this big bruising back as well. He's 6'2", 228, came out of Michigan. He can catch the ball, but it's sort of like Henry, where that's not his primary skill set. You have Julius Chestnut. He's 5'11", 228 pounds. Again, he's kind of built like Derrick Henry. I don't think pass catching is necessarily his number one skill set. And then you have Trenton Cannon. He's essentially a pure special teamer. I'm not sure if he gets any normal snaps in this game. If you were looking at one guy just from a physical standpoint, Trenton Cannon would be the guy you maybe think is the pass catcher, 5'11", 185. But honestly, they don't really have a guy on the roster right now that fills out the same kind of profile that they had in the past. McNichols a little bit smaller. Darrington Evans was a little bit smaller. We know Hilliard's a little smaller. He's 202 pounds. So I think they might just out of necessity be forced to play some Derrick Henry in this regard. But like maybe you see some Hassan Haskins. He's the only other back outside of Dontrell Hilliard that saw regular snaps in the game. And by regular, I mean just non-special teams.
And Hilliard ran 6 routes, had 4 targets, 3 receptions, 61 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, to your point, Derrick Henry ran more routes than him. He essentially doubled him up. But
yeah, more than doubled him up. Yeah. But dude, 3 for 61 and 2 touchdowns on 6 routes. And then OJ Howard in that same week had 2 touchdowns on 5 routes or something? Crazy.
Yeah, man, that OJ Howard stuff's ridiculous. Rip all of my Brevin Jordan shares.
Oh, yeah, just brutal. But again, I don't want to get too bogged down in this. It just feels like to me, though, you can't predict everything. And as we've learned in the NFL, you can't predict a lot of things. If Tennessee does struggle to run the ball, you're going to see a lot more forced pass attempts for Ryan Tannehill. And the problem is you don't have A.J. Brown anymore. You have Robert Woods coming off an ACL. You have a guy in Kyle Phillips who led the team in targets and receptions last year, and he's questionable for this one with the shoulder. And then you have Treylon Burks. So how potent can this passing offense be this week? And what do you think the pressure looks like against Ryan Tannehill, given how good the Buffalo Bills line and the impact of Von Miller looked last week?
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge. And it's not just him. We've talked about this in the past too. This line is deep. They've invested a lot of resources on this defensive line. So Von Miller, certainly the household name, but they have multiple high draft picks on this offensive line. So it's not only the star power, but they're deep. They can rotate guys. You don't necessarily need Von Miller out there for a maximum number of snaps. Maybe you can take him off situationally, feel decent about the replacements and keep him fresh. And you can do that with really everyone on their D-line. I think that is a huge mismatch today. And Tannehill, he is mobile. He's not like Lamar Jackson, so he can avoid some of that pressure. but ideally you don't want him to sustain any at all. I think it's going to be a little bit tough sailing for Tannehill today. Buffalo's secondary held up for the most part with some of the injuries they sustained last week. They played a lot of zone. I believe they only had 2 snaps in man coverage all game. So I think that's going to be something that they try to continue as long as they're battling injuries in the back end, which was really positive to see. I wasn't sure how they were going to handle that. All that to say, Tannehill should be under some pressure today. I think the secondary bandaged over some of those injuries well, and that was against a better passing attack. Now you're talking about Tannehill, potentially Kyle Phillips list, which is crazy to say. And who do we look to in the pass game, maybe for just some cheap PPR volume? I think that's really the main question we're asking ourselves right now.
Exactly. And I will say, I do kind of like Tannehill over 10.5 rushing yards today.
I like that too. It makes a lot of sense from a pressure standpoint. We've seen some of these mobile quarterbacks just evade pressure, get additional scrambles, and then we know he'll have an occasional designed rush attempt here to utilize his mobility.
Yeah, he can move. And in the red zone too, right? Like, you see them actually draw up plays for him in the red zone. Yeah. All right. So let's try and figure this out. If we're talking about the pass catchers here and the price points on these pass catchers, you've got none of them that are all that expensive at all. Woods, 4,400. Burks, 4,200. Phillips is 3,600 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you have Phillips at 5,300, Treylon Burks at 5,500, and Woods at 5,400. So if you're just talking about cheap options, it's not the best matchup, but some of the cheapest receivers that could actually have, say, a 10-target game just because there's no definitive number one in this offense, it's going to come from Tennessee in terms of the upside for targets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Looks like maybe on our back end, the Monday slate's using the primetime pricing. So excuse me if I said any incorrect prices already. It seems like on the back end, it's just yesterday's primetime pricing.
Gotcha.
So I'll just take it straight from DraftKings from now on. But as far as this receiving pecking order,
where are you seeing that? Because it looks right on our ownership projections. It looks right. I'm
on the projections page.
Okay.
I went to NFL premium data projections, NFL DFS projections.
Okay. It looks like Monday. On ownership, it's all right.
All right. I'll use that page then too. But anyway, I think the pricing's correct. None of them should really be above 5K because not only did you not have a clear number one, you didn't even have a clear number one in terms of routes.
Right.
I think for that purpose, it's probably Robert Woods. He did run the most routes. I think he's the most well-known commodity of this group. I mean, Kyle Phillips at the end of the day is still a day 3 rookie. I know they like him a lot, but he was second, tied with Nick Westbrook-Akine, who's another UDFA practice squad caliber player who's playing legitimate snaps for this team. They both had 25 routes, and Burks came in at 14. Couple reasons I think maybe to take a look at Burks in what could be a low-owned spot. He had a really high target rate on the routes he ran. When he was on the field, they were actually looking his way, and they were looking his way downfield. This guy actually had a lot of air yards, 34% for a guy that just had 15 routes. For him to lead the team in air yards kind of tells you how they are trying to use him as a situational deep threat with room to grow in the offense, especially given the injury to Kyle Phillips. So I don't mind Burks buying low on him. They need to play him. Their just receiver core is not good enough to have him on the bench right now.
I think Burks is my favorite. I think you have the highest ceiling on Burks.
I agree.
And yeah, I think that's what you were saying as well. Look, I'm not excited about any of these guys, and it's not even a good matchup. Yeah, I know that Tre'Davious White is on the IR, and there's some holes to be patched as far as Buffalo's defense goes in the secondary compared to where they were a season ago. But they're still very good. They still have a pass rush. This team is good. But this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, Matt. If you haven't built lineups yet and you're watching this show, you'll understand that you have to get, a couple of these 4K players into lineups to create anything good.
And this appears to be a good spot to do so. Looking at the ownership projections, none of these Tennessee guys are owned.
Dude, they're so low owned. Burks, we have it as the lowest owned player, I think.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's the wide receiver 1 today. Again, This is probably the situation with the most fragility in all of the projections today, just the Tennessee receiving core. We don't know what they plan on doing long-term. They use a rotation in week 1. They have a really high draft pick in Burks, who was uninvolved. But again, you can go back a couple of years now and see multiple examples of this. Justin Jefferson barely played his first 2 games in the NFL before erupting onto the scene. He was a former first-round pick as well. You just can't sit your first-round picks. So eventually Burks is going to play, and he's going to play a lot.
Agreed. And, on one hand, you go, man, he only ran 13 routes last week. That's not what we're looking for. He's only out there for 37% of snaps. But I could say on the other hand, he still grabbed 5 targets. He still saw 5 targets on that limited route participation, which suggests that when he's out there, he's getting opportunities. And if on a 2-game slate, it turns out that he is out there more, Matt, and he doubles his routes, then we could be in business. But look, we're on the same page. None of these guys are exciting, but you're going to have to, you have to be entertaining the idea of playing these Tennessee wide receivers, no matter what.
I know it's a little crazy to say. I would say Burks is my favorite. Woods is probably the most consistent. Woods could be a guy that eats up the Buffalo zone, and maybe not for productivity, but for cheap PPR volume. And that's really what you're looking for like a 4.4K wide receiver and below. Behind them, I mean, it's pretty dicey. Would you rather just play Burks than Westbrook-Ikhine?
I think so, yeah.
Same. I don't think the difference in routes is enough where I really want to save the 300 and play Ikhine. And Kyle Phillips, I don't know if he's going to play. And if he does play, is he on a snap count?
For me, I think we know what Westbrook-Ikhine is about. We know what a lot of these guys are about. With Treylon Burks, at least I can look at him and go, well, I don't really know what he's about, but maybe maybe you get that ceiling game out of it. I don't think you're getting that from most of these other options on the team. Do you want to stack any Tennessee? And what are you doing at the tight end position? Then we'll move on.
I think they're the least attractive stack, but that should be reflected in ownership as well. If you're playing things of the Millie Maker size, I think you should try to get some Tennessee, assuming you're running multiple lineups. I'd be trying to stack with Burks and Woods. They're cheap enough where you're not only gaining leverage, but you should be able to jam some of the better plays on the slate outside of that. Tight end is kind of a mess for this team. You're using a rotation between Austin Hooper and Jeff Swaim. That's really tough to see. I thought Hooper might have some viability this year if he was getting all the snaps, but you look at the snap shares, Hooper 40%, Jeff Swaim 45%. So you can tell they played a little 12 personnel, but then you look at the routes, 26 for Hooper, 15 for Swaim. That's pretty rough.
Very rough. And hey, if you guys are betting this or you want to, and you're already at FanDuel or DraftKings and you go, you know what? They don't give me any perks anymore. I'm looking for a promo. I'm looking for perks. BetMGM, baby. Links in the description. Mike can throw it in the chat. All you do to get $200 in free bets, I mean, it's a phenomenal promo, is take $10 when you use this link. If you're listening after the fact, links in the description. Again, you're listening now, you can use the one we're going to throw in chat or in the description, whatever. Take $10 or more if you want. Deposit it when you use that link. Put it on either team to win tonight. So it could be from either game, but you got to bet the money line. The worst case scenario in a situation like this is you get your $200 and you go on a terrible run and you lose everything and you're still only down $10. The downside is $10 lost over the course of how long? The upside is you go on a mega heater, you turn it into 4 or 5 figures. It's simple math here, where anybody would tell you, you take advantage of all these promos on books that are giving you free money and $200 like BetMGM is doing. So if you haven't taken advantage of it, do it. And Matt, I think, and the reason I bring it up now is, if you're putting $10 down on a money line, if you win, you get the 200. If you lose, you still get the 200. The Bills might come out and surprise. Maybe I would just put the 10 on the Bills money line since I'm getting $200 back regardless.
Yeah, I don't hate that strategy at all. I mean, it's probably the safest play. We've said that a lot about some of these games, though, but I think I have more confidence in the Bills.
No,
it was just a short week ago that Seattle played on Monday night, though, so I don't know if I should be that confident.
Yeah. But I'm saying you got the guaranteed money coming your way anyway, so you might take that 10, put it on a plus 340 dog. But if you're not doing that and you're taking advantage of this promo, don't take the Bills money line. Go ahead and take the Vikings or the Eagles if you don't want to take the Titans, because you got plus 120 or minus 140. So in a spot like that, if you don't want to take the Titans and just let it ride because you know the money's coming your way, take the Vikings at plus 120 or the Eagles, because then if you cash, you'll at least have something coming back your way. You're not betting the Bills minus 425 with $10. That just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, links in the description, pin comment, $200 entirely free when you put $10 on money line for any team tonight using that link. All right. So, and yeah, Blitz, you'll get the bonus for sure. They always do. You'll get the bonus for sure. If you did it, you'll get the bonus. All right, Matt, Buffalo. Biggest question here is, does Gabe Davis play? And I'm seeing that he's closer doubtful than questionable.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to wait till pregame. So make sure you're catching live before lock. If he plays, you know what he is. He's the locked in wide receiver 2. If he's out, you're elevating Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder. So I think this is pretty easy. Just don't make your 150 till you get that news.
Exactly. All right. So do you want to target the backfield here today with Singletary and Moss? You and I kind of discussed this in the preseason that we thought, you know, we get plenty of stuff wrong, but this was one where we're like, hey, everyone's sleeping on Zach Moss, saying he's not going to have any involvement. Zach Moss had plenty of involvement in a huge week 1 Monday night game or Thursday night game to open up the season against the Super Bowl champion Rams.
Yeah, he did. He used a ton on the ground. The routes really surprised me. I kind of presumed he was going to be involved, but I thought this was going to be in a short yardage goal line package situation type role, but he was only 4 routes behind Devin Singletary. That is what really surprised me. It wasn't them necessarily playing these defined roles. It was kind of a legit 50-50 rotation between Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, maybe a little 60-40. Singletary definitely had the edge there, but for what it's worth, like Zach Moss is involved in this backfield. And I think a lot of it came at the expense of James Cook, but for pricing today, Zach Moss is certainly a value if you're trying to take a different approach and play a value RB piece, pay up a receiver. It seems like people are going to be doing the other way.
I was shocked to see that Zach Moss was targeted 6 times in the passing game on 14 routes. I mean, Matt, I do not anticipate that being the standard for Buffalo at all going forward. And like you said, he definitely took a lot away from James Cook, who finished with a fumble on 1 touch. But man, that pass catching involvement was shocking to me. I would like to see more of it go to Devin Singletary. I still think Devin Singletary is the guy here, but this is no like late season 2021 situation where Singletary is getting 80% of the snaps. And it certainly doesn't seem like a scenario where James Cooks is going to be heavily involved early on, at least. So do you have any lean one way or another from a DFS standpoint for the backfield, if you had to sum it up?
I prefer Moss at the price. I do agree with you. I think Singletary's ahead. I think it is close to a 60-40 split. And that's reflected in everything from the box score counting stats, the overall snaps, and the routes. Yes, Zach Moss had the 6 targets, but Singletary still ran more routes. So I think that normalizes over the course of a full season. James Cook probably gets involved at some point this season, but the fumble's certainly working against him. It was concerning already that he didn't come into the game till well after Cook and Singletary in their first matchup. And then he's still a rookie. And again, rookies are generally playing fewer snaps early in the year, and then they ascend into whatever role it is they're going to play later in the year. And we see this across positions and across players with draft capital, and Cook has some pretty good draft capital. So he would be third for me, like Singletary at the price. And Zach Moss for that matter.
All right, I'm going to ask you about Stefon Diggs in a slightly different method than I normally would, since we have 2 games here. By the way, we're 18 likes away from 100, so we're going to crush that easily. Appreciate you guys in advance. I don't want to ask you if you like Stefon Diggs today, because that's just always going to be a pretty obvious answer. How do you prioritize a guy like Stefon Diggs today? Let's say Gabe Davis is out, because like I said, it does appear that he is, at least the reporting is, that he could be more on the doubtful side than questionable. How do you stack him up against Jefferson and A.J. Brown today? He's in the middle of those as far as salary goes, sandwiched in between.
I think for price adjusted plays, he's probably number one. And I love Justin Jefferson. He's going to project for more points overall, and he absolutely should. The target share is going to be bigger. He's a more explosive player at this point in his career, but we're still talking about a huge difference in price on DraftKings specifically. And we're talking about players that are, on different teams. I think Buffalo is a little more explosive on offense. You're going to get a little more scoring opportunities. Their implied team total a little bit higher here. So for price adjusted plays, if you're forcing me to pick one, it's going to be Diggs between the two of them. And then I think AJ Brown is a little bit behind.
Okay.
Well, how would you rank them?
So you have Jefferson, Diggs, Brown.
In terms of raw projection, yes. In terms of price adjusted projection, I would go Diggs, Jefferson, Brown.
So would I. And we'll get to that game right after this. I would as well. And just more than anything, as much as impressive as AJ Brown was in week one, as good as he is everywhere, this is still a team that is going to very likely throw less than other teams, has a running quarterback. There's a lot of things that can get in the way, a lot more things that can get in the way of a big AJ Brown game than I think for Stephon Diggs or Justin Jefferson, especially if Gabe Davis is out. Now, what's really intriguing to me is if you're looking at the rest of this Buffalo team, if Gabe Davis plays at 6,100, I'm always on board with playing Gabe Davis. I love Gabe Davis. I love the deep threat ability. Josh Allen clearly trusts him now, and we saw that over the end of last season. He played 98% of snaps in week one. 98% of snaps in week one. I'm very happy with that. Ran a team high by far 38 routes. So even if he only saw 5 targets, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on him, Matt. I think 6,100 is a more than reasonable price on Gabe Davis in arguably the best offense in football.
I agree with you 100%. I honestly don't really think there's anything to add. Early returns on him have been fantastic. I think maybe if you're trying to poke holes, you wish he saw more targets. I mean, he had 5, right. But I mean, that is, you're digging really deep to poke holes in Gabe Davis at this point, especially at his price.
Yeah. If he's going to be on the field all game, I know he only saw 5 targets last week, but it's very possible that, he's going to have some 10 target games, and I'll be there for it. But we'll pay attention to his status. We have Deeper Dive Live Before Lock, all that stuff coming up tonight. So we're going to have you taken care of for sure. But really, I mean, Isaiah McKenzie, Jamison Crowder, these are 2 spots where, especially if Gabe Davis is out, and then what happens if Gabe Davis is out? Who fills in on the outside that could give us some value at wide receiver?
I think immediately Isaiah McKenzie becomes the number 2. That is based on routes mostly in snaps. He was ahead of Jamison Crowder. Even though Jamison Crowder finished with 1 more target, Isaiah McKenzie was still more involved from a route and snap perspective. Crowder, I think, would immediately jump to your wide receiver 3. And then the rotational player you're talking about, because Buffalo will run 4 wide at times, is probably Khalil Shakir, their rookie out of Boise State. Yep. He's a day 3 pick, but played well in the preseason. I think they activate him tonight, but you should definitely watch the Bills active, inactive report tonight and see who they bring up and how many receivers they have active. You could potentially get some condensed opportunity here.
If Davis is out, are we going to have to look to Shakir? I mean, if Davis is out, I don't know how we're not trying to get a Buffalo receiver in every lineup, just given some of the salaries.
Yeah, I think McKenzie's probably the guy you're just locking in at 4,100.
I think you're right.
He's 100 more than Crowder. I think he's ahead of Crowder. So that splits the crowder. And then it comes down to, would you rather throw a dart on Shakir at the Stone Min or play a 4,100 Crowder or Isaiah McKenzie? And I think I would rather just play the 4K receiver who I know is going to be involved.
Absolutely. Last thing, we know Josh Allen. Like we know we don't have to talk extensively about Josh Allen. It's pretty obvious at this point. If you want to play Josh Allen, you go ahead and you play Josh Allen. I do think there's an argument to be made that if you're looking to save salary in line, you just go with Jalen Hurts at a discount, because both the floor and ceiling on Jalen Hurts are very wildly impressive given his rushing upside. And if you want to add to Josh Allen, go for it. But what about Dawson Knox?
I don't really think there's much to add on Josh Allen. Play him if you can. He's awesome. I do think he's slightly better than Hurts in terms of price adjusted projection, but to your point, it's not close. And if you need to make the tough decisions, Hurts is fine. Dawson Knox is awesome. I think we're getting a solid buy low on him after a 2-target week 1. He was out on the field 86% of the snaps. Incredible involvement. It hasn't really changed from what we saw last year. Dominated the routes, 25 routes for Knox, just 5 for Sweeney. So it wasn't even close to a timeshare. You're looking at a really strong buy low case for Knox right now. And you don't have any of the elite tight ends on the slate. So you're not debating, all right, do I play Kelsey or Knox? You don't have to make that decision, which is one I particularly am happy about today.
Tight end sucks. And, we'll talk about it. You have a couple of them, sure. You have Dallas Goedert and Dawson Knox. I think it's not fun at all. Once you get below those guys, it is a complete and utter mess, which is why Dawson Knox is going to be, pretty high owned for that exact reason. So let's talk about, you have anything else for this game or you want to keep it moving?
We can keep it moving.
All right. So Minnesota at Philadelphia, Philly laying 2.5 at home. Before we do though, shout out to our sponsor Prize Picks. You guys, many of you guys are already playing over there because I see it in chat and I see it in the comments and I see the views on our Prize Picks videos on both of our channels. But if you haven't signed up there yet, you get up to $100 first match deposit bonus when you use the link in the description or that we're going to throw in chat right now. Very sick format, right? Because unlike other sites where you're taking salaries and you have to get in under the cap and do all of this stuff and pay attention throughout the entire day, Prize Picks, you're just building lineups out with props. There's no juice on either side. There's none of that, right? There's no odds. It's just the prop, over or under. And you're building 2, 3, 4, or 5 player props, lineups. And if you hit all 5 of them, you 10x your entry. If you hit 4, unlike a traditional prop at these other books, if you hit 4, you're still 2xing. If you hit 3, you even make money back. You can do cross sports as well. Whether if you're like Matt and UFC, you also know college football and NFL, you could go, all right, I'm going to throw a UFC pick in here. I'm going to go 2 college football. I'm going to go 2 NFL props, throw them all into one of those. There's a million different ways to do it. You can do the power play where you only pick 4. You don't get any money if you hit 3, but if you hit 4, you get 10x your money. So a lot of really fun ways you can do it. The site looks very nice. It's nice in the mobile app if you're on the Google Play or if you're in the Apple Store or Google Play Store, whatever it is. A lot of different ways to have fun with this. There's no sharks, optimizers, mass entries, anything like that. And the promo code, is it still awesome? Are we still on the Actually, just use the link. Use the link. Get you a $100 first match deposit bonus over at Prize Picks. So check that out. A lot of fun to be had. A lot of money to be made over there as well. All right, Matt, Minnesota. And by the way, MLB strategy show coming up after this. So don't go anywhere after the show. You got MLB strategy show right here on the channel coming up after this. I'm skipping Hall of Fame today, Mike. I'll do it tonight for the deeper dive. All right. Talk to me about Justin Jefferson, because as good as he is, as amazing as he is, you are paying for him today. If you're paying for him, you're going to have to, make adjustments elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think you should be doing this. I know you've built some lineups. I've been playing around with it behind the scenes too. I think he's actually pretty easy to fit. And with his role, he should be a player that's a priority for you. You shouldn't have too much trouble playing Jefferson, Diggs, and maybe one other elite guy. Because we have such cheap value on Buffalo, Tennessee, and some of these other positions, I think it's pretty easy to do. And he's kind of a Josh Allen evaluation. Like, what is there really to talk about Justin Jefferson? One thing I want to say about him before we move on, their OC has done an excellent job moving him around the formation, getting him away from coverage that could be a disadvantage to him. Last week, 60% of his targets came against linebackers and safeties, and Green Bay has an excellent secondary. So the ability for their OC to put Justin Jefferson in positions to succeed should give you confidence in him.
I don't have anything to add. It's like, you laid it out nicely. If you can get, no, not if you can, but you should be trying to get Justin Jefferson into lineups for sure. He's fantastic. I think 9K is a more than reasonable price point, to be completely honest with you. I also think it's nice to see somebody like Adam Thielen at 5,300. Now he's going to get ownership as well. And for good reason, because if there's one thing we know about Adam Thielen, he's never going to be the yards guy that he used to be, along with the touchdowns. He's never going to be the one there again. Very obvious. But he is someone that can score a lot of touchdowns. I mean, he double-digit touchdowns in back-to-back seasons, Matt. So even with someone like Justin Jefferson in the mix, and we've seen this, and it's not like Justin Jefferson's getting any worse. I'm certainly not saying that. But in 2 years with Justin Jefferson in the mix, not including week 1 of this year, Thielen still has 24 total touchdowns.
Yeah, and highly involved in the offense, exact same number of routes as Justin Jefferson. Actually played 2 more snaps. That not really significant, but just to point out, he's still their clear bona fide wide receiver 2. When teams do decide to dedicate extra coverage at Justin Jefferson's way, that's going to leave Thielen opportunities. And the price is more than fair, in my opinion. You're going to see Justin Jefferson dominate opportunities in this game. But Minnesota's transitioning offenses here, they're going to a pass heavier, slightly more up-tempo scheme than what you know and love from them in the past. That's only going to benefit Thielen too, and it hasn't really been reflected in price yet.
What do you want to do with KJ Osborne? Anyone else? Irv Smith was blanked on 2 targets last week. Any other pass catchers that make some sense here in large field tournaments, or just to be able to get in the top priced options and build a top heavy lineup?
Yeah, I like Osborne actually. Route share was around 60, 70%. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but wasn't quite a full-time player. They still use a little bit of 12 personnel, and we'll talk about the tight ends, but he had more targets than Adam Thielen in week 1. I don't think that persists, but it should just give you confidence in him as the wide receiver 3. He's a good pivot off your cheap guys down here, like Isaiah McKenzie, Jamison Crowder. Assuming the Gabe Davis injury rules him out, they're going to be more owned than Osborne, I would presume. That should make him a decent pivot. You're also looking at guys like Devontae Smith in this price range. I think Osborne could be pretty solid leverage off of them. And then at the tight end position, I'm going to keep going back to Irv Smith. I'm going to play him a little bit today. I know the reports coming out weren't positive, but ultimately, this is a guy that ran 1 fewer route than Johnny Munt. Yes, Johnny Munt played a ton more than Irv Smith, but the routes were almost identical. Munt is essentially a glorified blocker. And I think there's only room for Irv Smith to grow. He's a guy that didn't play in the preseason. He's coming off a season-ending injury last year. I think he is more involved in the game plan moving forward, especially with his receiving upside. They can flex him into the slot.
You know, the one issue I have with Dalvin Cook today, and it's not something that is necessarily going to be the case, but I'll explain. So the Eagles drafted, and you know this guy, you know all about him. They drafted Jordan Davis, right? Just an absolute behemoth on the defensive line. And the problem that comes to mind is when Jordan Davis was in the game in week 1, Detroit's run efficiency was horrible. When he was out of the game, they were straight carving up the Eagles. I just don't know if Jonathan Gannon is someone who is going to make those adjustments. And I don't know how many snaps you can have Jordan Davis on the field for throughout the entirety of this game. If he's in there, all 900 pounds of him, clogging up those running lanes, I definitely think it's going to have an impact, but I don't know how much they're going to use him. So at this rate, I just have to assume that Dalvin Cook's going to have his day.
I think he'll have his day regardless. A couple of reasons why. I have confidence in their OC not to run him against Jordan Davis.
That's what I was hoping as well. Exactly. Yeah.
That should be the number one priority when they're scheming their run game is do not run towards Jordan Davis. You can make a case he's the most athletic human in the NFL in the history of the game because of his athleticism at his size, it's unbelievable. So even when you decide to run, if you run like off tackle and stuff, Jordan Davis is athletic enough to chase down Dalvin Cook, which is incredible. But to your point on the snaps, he's never been a guy that's been able to play the full game. That was the issue with him at Georgia. And we saw that exploited in the SEC championship when Bama used tempo and then tried to keep him on the field. So yes, he was successful early in drives, but when they did use tempo and Davis was forced to play a string of series together back to back, his efficiency really declined. And that could be something Minnesota tries to do as well. I'm not sure how they attack it, but I really hope their game plan isn't to slam him up into the middle of that defensive line.
You would certainly hope not. Yeah, I mean, plus they like to rotate that defensive line a lot for the Eagles anyway. So Yeah, it's just one thing I'm saying. The more that Jordan Davis is in there, I think the better they do it at slowing down the run, because in week one, they struggled mightily. DeAndre Swift ate them up, and that was a huge issue for the Philadelphia Eagles. You want to talk about this Eagles offense?
Yeah, this is a really fun offense to talk about tonight.
It is. And by the way, would you rather play Dalvin Cook in a vacuum, Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry?
Dalvin Cook.
Okay. I mean, on DraftKings, Dalvin Cook is $200 more than Henry. I think it makes sense. On FanDuel, though, you have Derrick Henry that is $600 more than Dalvin Cook. So especially on FanDuel, Cook is the play for me. Philadelphia, do we really need to say much about Jalen Hurts as far as his fantasy viability goes tonight?
I don't think so. There's three clear quarterbacks that I think are okay to use. Allen being one, Hurts being two, Cousins being three, and then a tier breakdown to Tannehill.
Okay. I'm with you. Yeah. I think there's a tier break, honestly, from I think it's Allen, Hurts, and then a tier break to Cousins, and then a bigger tier break to Tannehill.
I agree with that.
What about the pass catchers? That we're gonna have to talk about this backfield too, which is just they had touchdowns, rushing touchdowns from Sanders, Gainwell, Scott, and Hurts last week. So we're gonna have a great time figuring this one. This will be the most tilt-worthy spot on the slate if they start rotating all their backs in at the goal line again. But actually, let's start with that. Miles Sanders did have 15 carries last game. Unsurprisingly, he was very efficient because he's always efficient with his carries. He averaged 7.4 yards per attempt. He had 2 targets, caught both for 9 yards, and he finally got that monkey off his back, got into the end zone. But like I said, Matt, they like to rotate backs. They like to give Boston Scott 4th and short carries. So that's fun.
That is really interesting. But it says to me, these guys don't necessarily have clear roles. They will just rotate on and off the field. And I think all of the opportunity metrics reflect that. You're talking 4th and short for Boston Scott. If it were me, I would try to give those opportunities to Miles Sanders, your most efficient back, but seems to be a pure rotation. And then in the pass catching room, Miles Sanders, 19 routes, Kenneth Gainwell, 10, Boston Scott, 6. That's all kind of in line with their overall snap. So no, it wasn't just Kenneth Gainwell playing like the clear pass catching role. They're still using Miles Sanders in that capacity. And even Boston Scott was dabbling in there. His routes were pretty solid considering the snaps he played. So to your point, I do think it's going to be a 3-way timeshare moving forward. They don't really seem likely to change at any point, but there's going to be a tilt towards Miles Sanders, then Kenneth Gainwell 2nd and Boston Scott 3rd, but all will be involved.
I will say though, if Miles Sanders is healthy, he's always going to lead the team in carries. I would be very hard pressed to see any path that he's not getting, the clear majority of carries if he's healthy. But the passing game, I think, is a little less obvious there. I'll tell you what, though, I like Miles Sanders in a spot like this. I think, 5,500. I think that's entirely reasonable. And one of the reasons for that, too, is he has the ability to break off big plays. So 2-game slate, Matt, Miles Sanders, no issues there. Are there any of these backs that in large field tournaments you think are really appealing?
Maybe from a leverage perspective, appealing is the operative word there. I don't know if they're appealing. You want to jam these guys in, but I do want to mix in backs in this range. I think there are players with legitimate opportunity, and then at some point you're just banking on multiple receptions or a potential touchdown. So I think it's a tough decision between Kenneth Gainwell, Zach Moss, and then you could go down and play Boston Scott if you'd like. But I think the real debate for me is, do we play like a Gainwell versus Zach Moss? It's one I've been thinking about a lot this morning. I think I'm tentatively leaning towards Zach Moss, but still not 100% decided there. Boston Scott's right in that range too. I think he's a distant third between the other two.
Okay. Well, if we're talking about the pass catchers, Jalen Hurts looked a little better last game. Definitely threw some darts to A.J. Brown downfield and was smart at getting rid of the football in spots where there was pressure. That was encouraging. Okay. He hasn't done that in the past. So good stuff. I'm still not entirely trusting of him as a passer. But the price point on Devontae Smith, I think it's still too low, Matt. I know he was completely uninvolved last game, was literally blanked across all of week 1 on 4 targets, but you're going to have to make these uncomfortable decisions on a 2-game slate. That's really all it comes down to for me. I'm not speaking for you, but you have to make uncomfortable decisions. And one of them is probably going to be getting a decent amount of Devontae Smith at 4,500.
I like Devontae Smith. I think there's a couple reasons for his poor game. One, Detroit took a very interesting strategy in their secondary, and they put Jeff Okudah on Devontae Smith, decided to shadow the number 2, and then try to dedicate extra coverage with lesser talent to A.J. Brown. That clearly didn't work. So I think Devontae Smith is potentially seeing lighter coverage today. His routes were fine. I mean, he's on the field. He's running routes. He's going to see more targets than he saw last week. 1 week samples, these are going to regress. And for Devontae Smith, this should be positively. And then it's a pretty good game environment. Everything you said about Hurts, I like it. Not scared of the Minnesota secondary. I like the improvements Hurts appears to have made year over year. And at 4,500, from a pure leverage perspective, I do think Devontae Smith is also another player you could use as a pivot off of the cheap Buffalo receivers or a KJ Osborne, who we just talked about.
Anybody else you want to get to for the Philadelphia Eagles? Dallas Goedert. Yeah. Again, yeah, you mentioned Quez. And anybody else here before we build a lineup and send this over to the MLB crew?
We should just mention a few guys. They rotate their third receiver a little bit. Quez Watkins, 53% of the snaps. Zach Pascal, 22. Just dart throws to me. I think you can find better price adjusted plays, but if you're in the middle and you want to take some shots, those are the guys. Goddard's the number 1 tight end. They did not use as much 12 personnel as they have historically used in Philadelphia. And I think that makes sense just from a player personnel perspective. You can have a lot of confidence in Goddard. I think he's the number 1 projected tight end on this slate. If you want to pivot to Dawson Knox, I think that's fine, but there's very clearly a top 2 tight ends in my opinion.
Damn, we got almost 700 people watching right now for a Monday morning show, Matt.
Thank you guys for all being here. It's early, especially you guys on the West Coast. I don't know if you're catching this driving to work, whatnot, but thank you for being here.
Hell yeah. All right, let's build a lineup. And if you guys jumped in late, the MGM promo is still live. $10 into $200. Very simple. Just bet a team to win. So bet the money line today. Use the link in the description, the one that we can throw in chat right now. Click that, sign up, because you're not going to be getting these promos from FanDuel and DraftKings, and I know you're already signed up there. Put that $10 or more on any team you want to win tonight. Again, I would either do the Bills if I'm going crazy, just because they're a huge dog, or I'm just betting the money line on the Eagles or the Vikings, because you can't. I'm sorry, the Titans, not the Titans, or I'm going with the Vikings or the Eagles. I'm not putting my 10, even if it's $10, I'm not putting my $10 money line bet on the damn Bills. But yeah, into $200 free bets like that after the game settles. Take advantage of it. Turn that bankroll into something good. So if we're building a lineup, Matt, it's not like what we usually do. We got to do this quick because MLB is coming up. So I'll let you go first at quarterback.
I think Hurts is a solid pivot off of really high on Josh Allen. We know the upside with his legs.
All right. So we go Jalen Hurts. I'm going to go. It's fine, Mike. If the lineup, if you're not getting it to work, it's fine. Well, why don't you screenshot DK then? Oh, okay. All right. So Jalen Hurts, I'm not going to stack it quite yet. I want to get Jefferson in there and see what our salary looks like. So I'm throwing Justin Jefferson in as well.
We can do plenty with Justin Jefferson.
No doubt.
I think we can also play Stephon Diggs and feel okay about it.
All right. All right. So does this mean we're not getting to one of these top running backs? Probably.
I think we can still get Cook.
All right. So let me go down here a little bit. I'm going to start this Hurts stack with Devonta Smith.
Love that. He's the guy I would try to use at this point if we're prioritizing the expensive receivers too, and we get some leverage. So are we going to pencil in Cook?
What's that?
Are we going to pencil in Dalvin Cook?
Can we make it work?
I think so.
Oh, it's going to be tough. All right. So that's Dalvin Cook. We got 3,500 per player remaining.
One's a defense though, right?
Yeah. So let's just throw in.
Do the Eagles.
Throw in the Eagles defense. I don't really care what defense I play on a 2-game slate. Don't care what players I have going against them either. A pick 6 can make all the difference. Eagles D, you're going to have to go cheap tight end too.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. We don't have a Kelsey on the slate.
Give me the cheapest you're willing to go here.
Irv Smith or Hooper Swaim.
Let's go with Jeff Swaim. We got 4,300 remaining.
We're in a great spot. We can get a Buffalo receiver.
All right, McKenzie.
Yeah, or Crowder. I don't care which one. Maybe we could move up tight end if one of them makes sense.
Yeah, if you throw McKenzie in, you can get a Gainwell. You can get a Zach Moss. Okay.
That's actually pretty good.
It's actually not that bad. For a large field tournament, Millie Maker.
Yeah. I like this lineup a lot.
Not bad. I would go Gainwell in a spot like this, though. Personally, you have Diggs, McKenzie. Give me Gainwell there because you're getting that stack piece with Hurts if he targets him in the passing game, which I believe could be the case. Gainwell saw 4 targets last game as well. I kind of like that lineup.
Yeah, me too.
No, it doesn't. We still have 100 left. Jalen Hurts, Dalvin Cook, Kenny Gainwell, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, Devonta Smith, Jeff Swaim, Isaiah McKenzie, Eagles defense. We have 100 left there. Yeah.
I think it's a good example too. Like you can build multiple studs in your lineup and there's viable cheap plays.
Love it. Love it. Hey, follow Matt at Matt_Gajewski, me at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. Shout out to Mike for producing this one. Stick around. MLB strategy shows coming up next. And we got the deeper dive live before live. We got all of our Monday night betting picks over on the Odds Shopper channel and a whole lot more. So we'll see you there. Peace.